Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, dozens of migrant domestic workers gathered outside the government headquarters to demand better rights. The plight of domestic workers has been brought into sharp focus in recent months following the case of an Indonesian maid, Erwiana, who was abused by her employer. The case has sparked calls for Hong Kong to revise its policies on migrant workers.
Hong Kong government not really taking all the issue of women, including the migrant domestic workers.
Women and employers and women employers and also migrant domestic workers, they're suffering from the many policies from the Hong Kong government as well. Hong Kong has about 330,000 foreign domestic workers, and most of them come from the Philippines and Indonesia, and nearly all women who can earn more in Hong Kong to send back to their families than they can at home.
It's not something that I need to give an opinion on. It's just factual that they are being treated unfairly, and like what their sharing of experiences here, how they are treated at immigration, how they're being asked to queue in a different line, how they're asked to follow different regulations. I mean, that's just the definition of unfairness.
All right, and joining us live through Skype right now, our program is very honored to have Mabel Au, Director of Amnesty International Hong Kong. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, so coinciding with the International Women's Day, there are protests in Hong Kong, and this was brought about by the plight of domestic workers, especially with a focus on Erwiana, the Indonesian maid who was tortured by her by Miss Lau Tan Wong. That's her name, yes. And what do you think, ma'am? Could you give us your take on this?
Well, actually, in year 2013, Amnesty International has already released a report. It's very focused on the Indonesian domestic helpers situation in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And then from the reports, we have a lot of findings. And then like a lot of Indonesian domestic helpers mm-hmm. were, underpaid. Yes. And then they were get all kinds of deprived from food or rest. Because they were, compulsory, they have to live with the family. So that's why sometimes they were just like 24 hours on call for their work. And some of the employers even get them to work in another family. And then for example, if you have your parents' family, and then they call them to not only work for the employer's family and also work for the employer's parents' family, this kind of overwork, and then without any holidays. So our findings have the more serious situation is we find that they were overcharged by their agency fees, because a lot of helpers they via the agency, in Indonesia and also in the agencies in Hong Kong, then they can have a contract. And then throughout the process, they get overcharged by those agencies. And then some of them, they for their first contracts of the first contracts, first 7 months salaries are all gone to these kind of agency fees. But then with a lot of different names or package, it end up they own the agency or the related institution a lot of money as a debt. But then in any case, it is not really the case, because as Amnesty, we have already asked the Hong Kong government and also the Indonesian governments mm-hmm. that there is a standard way, the standard rates of this kind of fees. But then for somehow that because it's not got seriously monitor or investigates, so that's why a lot of domestic helper they were fall into all those traps. And then, or else they, some of them, once they come to Hong Kong, they arrive Hong Kong, their passport, their travel document will get confiscated by the employer or by the agents. So that's why when they face all those abuse or even very extreme cases like Ariana's case, they are not there to go to make any complaints. Or else some of them, they are very fresh, they don't know where to launch all these complaints.
Yes, Mabel, can you please tell me 6 years imprisonment, 15,000 Hong Kong dollars for Lau. Do you think Ariana got the short end of justice?
Well, in any case that we welcome the courts to like have this found the employers were guilty, because this really bring the justice to Ariana. And then what we think that is more important is what the Hong Kong government has promised us, not only the Amnesty International, but then last year, right after Ariana's case broke out, that the Hong Kong government, especially the Chief Secretary of Welfare and Labour, Mr. Mabel Au, and then he promised us that they will carry out a thorough investigation on the agency and also the employer. If there is any case of abuse or overcharge or any, malpractice from the agents, then the Hong Kong government will carry out a investigation, and then if they found that it is like any breaches of the regulations, then they will get prosecuted. But then from up to now, that we don't get any report or any information that the Hong Kong government had carried out any this kind of investigation.
And finally, Mabel, do you think that by putting Lau behind bars will really resolve the abuses on OFWs or overseas workers or domestic workers working there in Hong Kong?
It should not seen as the only result or only way to handle the problem, because the problem is very complicated and also very widespread. And of course, when the employer is found guilty, of course, we are very happy for Ariana, because he comes through a very long way, and even though he was already tortured, like cannot move, but then he still a very strong girl to to take up the courage to fight for justice. But then that we really urge both the government that they should crack down to make a strong actions on those agents if they really violate any regulations. And of course, if there should be some more policies to strengthen the knowledge of the domestic helpers, and at the same time that the police and immigrations and all those the Hong Kong government, that they should reach out to provide more supports to the domestic helpers to guarantee that they come all the way to Hong Kong and then they work in Hong Kong safely.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Mabel. I know you are very busy, but still you took time out for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your invitation.
Thank
thanks.
you. All right, Ms. Mabel Au, Director of Amnesty International Hong Kong. Thank you so much.